Hello and welcome to the live podcast, Win More on Purpose. Today we have Dave Officer with us on staying human, how to creatively think using AI instead of letting it use you. Agenda, for those of you who are new here, it's going to be conversational. Me and Dave are going to be speaking together. We're all here learning together. So there's going to be Q&A at the end. Write down those questions as we're happy to take them at the end of the podcast. As we are live, you can put into the chat where you're coming in from today, what it is that you're focusing on your business, or what it is that you do. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Yaacov Steinberg. I'm a sales coach for just about 5 years full-time right now. When I first went into the coaching space, I noticed pretty quickly people were able to build 6-7 figure business on their own. They're good at what they do. They're passionate. Some put along the way learning how to speak to people. But they'd hit this glass ceiling, either because they were making it up as they went along, which only will take you so far, or they didn't want to be that sleazy used car salesperson, stereotypical, pushy, getting people to buy things they didn't even need. And they were a little bit stuck. And that's where I came into the picture. Mindset, techniques, skills, really helping people to have that confidence and clarity to know who they needed to speak to, where to find them, what to say to them, and how to say it. Thankfully, I've had the pleasure of working with quite a number of pretty well-known people on LinkedIn, whether it's Chai Fishman, Hoodie Bluch, Hoodie Greenberger, or Ellie Bosch, just to name a few. And the people that have worked with me at the 6-7 figure level have been able to grow by even 50% in the first 60 days of working with me. Those at the 100K level, give or take, have been able to grow by even 150% in the first 60 to 90 days. And solopreneurs just starting out, even only making $4,000 a month, have been able to grow by 200 to 240% in the first 45 days of working with me. Dave, really excited to have you with us today. Tell us a little about yourself, and let's get the show on the road.
Hello. My intro isn't going to be anywhere near as impressive as yours just was. Mine's just, I'm a dude who designs things for people and draws things for people and helps people come up with ideas for things. Ta-da! I haven't prepared it.
Not everyone can do that. It's an impressive thing in and of itself, that's for sure. And look, you're trying to keep us all human within this whole AI race, so that's going to be a big thing.
Yeah. Hopefully. I'm trying to keep this thing active.
Exactly. So I think the first thing that we all need to understand before we could talk about how to stay human and what AI poses as a quote unquote threat to that is we called this thing staying human, how to creatively think using AI instead of it letting you use you. What does creative thinking even mean? Let's start with that.
The proper definition for it is coming up with original ideas by connecting sort of seemingly disparate existing things together to create something new.
Sure.
So a lot of people think that there are no original ideas left, and that's not true. There are plenty. So, for example, even if I look around my desk, there's a microphone in front of me, and there's a cup. Let's put the two things together and create a microphone that doubles up as some sort of vessel for your drinks, right? Now, there's an original idea that probably doesn't exist because it's useless, but it's just, from spending like 5 seconds looking at my desk, there's a thing, there's a new idea, but it's right. About connecting things, but in a useful way and in a meaningful way, or albeit a humorous way, or just in a new, intriguing way. It's finding ways to connect existing ideas to create something new. Essentially, is the sort of the dictionary definition, and probably the most widely accepted definition of what creativity is: coming up with original ideas.
Yeah, and I'd say the purpose of that is kind of to get our brains moving, right? One of the biggest things that we suffer as a generation or as a people at this point in human existence is the fact that we have a lot of reasons to just sit around and not do very much, right? Those nothing boxes are getting really well used, and it's a problem. A lot of people don't really want to be thinking at all. A lot of people just want to stay in their zone, not, just space out and not do anything. And I think that's really one of the biggest things within creative thinking. It's a lot about getting your brain moving and trying to, stay active within the mental realm, right? Keeping physical as a side realm for a minute. And that's a big part about being human to begin with.
Yeah. It's like any other part of your body and your life. If you don't use it, I mean, you don't use it, you lose it, right? So there's I don't know why the thing that came into my head as an analogy as you were talking about people not really leaving their homes is I've just spent a bit of time out in Japan recently,
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
they have got a impending population crisis as
Yeah.
their young generation is not procreating, and they are not because they're at the forefront of video games and home entertainment and that side of tech, and they're they're teenagers. They're literally not leaving their homes, and they are just obsessed with, there's a massive esports um, community out there and all sorts of things, but they're not leaving those handsets, and as a result, they're not going out. And I mean, they're typically a shy nation anyway, but this is just sort of compounding that, and they're not getting out and meeting people, and they're becoming even more shy, becoming more insular, and the like teenagers are becoming so sort of self-conscious. They're not going out and just pressing the flesh and just meeting other humans, and as a result, they're not dating anybody, and no one is making sweet love. And at the minute they're fine, they've got a massive population, but if you look ahead 50, 60 years, it's going to start plummeting. So they're looking at ways at trying to fix that now because they can see the problem coming. And it's the same sort of thing. They're not going out and exercising their social skills, so they're losing them rapidly, and that's happening in all sorts of places around the world. So yes, interesting and slightly terrifying times.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, before we can start talking about how we're going to have creative thinking be helped through AI, I think one of the things that we need to understand is, why does AI even pose a problem to begin with? Right. And I think that, I've definitely heard you speak about this quite a bit. And I think most people, when it came to AI first coming out, we all thought of, the Terminator or any of these other types of, artificial intelligence ideas. It's the idea of artificial intelligence. Someone else is doing things for you, and therefore you don't have to work as hard. Right. And the problem with that is then you stop using your mental faculties to the level with which they can be used. And then, like you just said, things start to atrophy when you don't use them. They start to fall apart and wither away, and we become less creative and less thinking. And, the last thing we all want is to be those, big, huge balls of blob just sitting on couches, hoping that someone robot is going to bring us our next meal.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying to many people, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you can already see it to a certain extent with things like with Google Maps being a thing that we just have on our person. We have satellite navigation in our pocket all the time. That was unthinkable when you and I were growing up. And you used to, when you would first go somewhere, you would imprint those directions. You would burn them into your mind because you're like, right, if I need to go here again, I need to remember where this is. But now, if you're jumping in the car and you're going somewhere new, certainly for me, whatever route you've just taken, if someone ever asks me, "Oh, which way did you come?" I'll be like, "I've no idea, mate. The phone, I just pressed the button on the phone."
I did this the other day. We went somewhere, me and the family, and we put in the directions. And I kid you not, for 20 minutes, we're just following this thing almost in like circles. I'm like, we were just here. This doesn't make any sense, and this is nowhere near where we want to be. Yeah. Within like 3 minutes, I'm like, this is not the right place.
And
it just kept taking us.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculous. At a certain point, we're just like, you know what? We're just gonna go the way we know, because we're like, yeah, it's probably taking us in a shortcut. Yeah, that's probably what it's doing.
It knows better.
Yeah, it knows better. Exactly. And a couple minutes later, we're like, we're done. We turned off the phone. We're just like, okay, we're gonna go the way we know. We're just gonna ask some directions to get there, and we're gonna see how long that takes. A couple of minutes, we were like on our way. We're like, oh, we made it in time. It was like, but that's exactly what it is, right? When we were younger, I mean, it was like you went somewhere you didn't know, you took a map and you learned how to read the map and understand how to get from point A to point B. Most people today doesn't even know what a map really looks like other than Google Maps or Waze or anything like that. They don't know what a real map looks like with those little squigglies, and they're like, oh, that's a river, and that's a mountain and a valley, and you're like, what are you talking about? That's just like a bunch of circles. You're like, exactly. It's like they don't know how to read a key or any of this type of stuff. And these were things that like we had to actually entertain ourselves when we were kids, like figure out things to do outside of the house. Cause mom was like, go and don't come back till dinner time. But you better be here on time for dinner. Go entertain yourselves out there in the real world.
Yeah. Go and get some cuts and get muddy.
Yeah. And we'll be happy.
So there's already signs of our brains becoming useless in certain ways that they weren't even like 20 years ago. I don't need to retain any information when I can pick up my phone and Google the answer to something in seconds. So why do I need to store it in here? It's gone the second that the second that I find something out, like, what was that actor? Was that actor in that thing? Oh, it was that. Okay, fine, gone again. So yes, so that's the thing. I've completely forgotten what you asked me.
That was. I mean, that's exactly the point. The point is like, what's the danger that AI poses? And then from there, I mean, like the next step we obviously want to take is how can AI help us to think in a creative way, right? Which is a big part of what we're doing here, because we would think that it's the opposite based on everything we just said, right? AI, to a certain degree, based on what we just said, is the thing that takes away creativity. You don't have to think, you don't have to retain information. You literally pick out your phone and say, hey Siri, hey Google, tell me this information, and that's it. In one ear, out the other. We're not listening, we're hearing the information and not even listening to it. So how does AI help us to think creatively?
So I should probably start by saying that I'm quite pro AI. I'm not, and although all we've done so far is speak about it negatively, but I think that's healthy, right? I'm a fan. I'm a fan of it. I'm just not a fan of overusing it in certain areas, and that's exactly what you're talking about. So,
listen, we have to bring out the other side before we can bring out the good side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Obviously, so my concern with it and what you've just mentioned about it, it's seeming counterintuitive that it would help us with creativity, given everything we've just said, is the fact that a lot of companies are concerned that they will no longer look relevant if they're not using it in some shape or form. So they're shoehorning it into absolutely everything to the point where it's becoming ridiculous. Little things like, I mean, this is top of my mind because I was just on the website, but on LinkedIn, for example, they've got, if you're going to comment on someone's post, there is a pre-filled AI generated comment.
So terrible too. It doesn't even make any sense.
They are awful. But that's someone at LinkedIn going, we need to show that we are relevant. We need to show that we're embracing this new technology and we're keeping up with the times. So just throw some AI functionality onto the site. I don't care how useful it is, just throw something on there. And they're guilty of that, and numerous other sites are guilty of that. And the more and more that happens, I think people are just going to be, these prompts are everywhere. Like, you don't worry about thinking about what to write. Just press this button. I'll do it for you. And that's appearing more and more and more and more. And it's not an intelligent way to use this new technology. It's just people wanting to shoehorn it in to justify their jobs or to desperately cling on to some sort of relevance. So it's sad to watch, but it does mean that it's now sort of it's already feels saturated before it's even really begun to mature and become a really useful tool. Right. So the more and more it's kind of plonked everywhere, the more and more it will just be used as this real sort of, even for the most simple tasks, when you just want to think of what to write on an email, you just press the button and, oh yeah, there's the email I was going to write, and oh, there's the comment I could write to the person, and oh, let me reply to one of my friends who just sent me a nice message. I don't know what to say. Press the button. Oh, that'll do. Send it. And all of a sudden, your ability for simple communication is just dead. And so that's the concern with where it seems to sort of be going, because every tech bro on the planet is just trying to cram it into everything. But that's the bleak side. And I think everybody will start to become quite fatigued with it because it is being shoehorned everywhere. So anyway, that's a whole other thing. I think it can be useful because I one of the things I talk about in terms of creativity quite a bit is reframing questions. And quite often you'd be surprised at the ideas that you can come up with when you just reframe the way you're asking yourself how to come up with them in the first place. So there was a post I put out earlier on today. Quite often people will sit down when they want to think of ideas, or they're brainstorming with a team, and they'll ask a very basic question, which doesn't really inspire anybody to think in an innovative or lateral way at all. So, for example, the example I used earlier on today was, if you wanted to think of ways to promote your business, if you wanted to think of content ideas that would promote your business online, the obvious thing to do is sit down with a pen and paper and go, right, what are some content ideas I can think of doing? And that will...
And you hear crickets, and
and you might think of some things. They might be fairly obvious, but it's not really a question that's going to inspire you to think in a different way.
Right.
Quite often, the best thing to do to act as a catalyst to get you fired up and thinking things in a different way, in an interesting way, are often questions that don't garner the perfect response. So the example that I used earlier on was, just challenge yourself to write 50 terrible ideas, really, really bad ideas that the last thing on earth you would want to do to promote your business. Another one is evil brainstorming, where you encourage, if you're brainstorming with a team, you encourage everybody to do something so evil that it would just have the opposite effect of what you're trying to do. Just go like dark, and so it's just a more interesting way of thinking of something. And what it does is, the more of these kind of ideas you start to write out, yes, you probably won't use the exact things that you're writing out, but when you come back to read them, they'll help spark other ideas, because it's just got you out of that sort of rut. So
right.
This is my sort of long-winded way of saying that AI is useful. I don't think it should ever be used to come up with the actual final idea, but it can be used to prompt you to go in a certain different direction. So you can say to it, rather than, I'm trying to think of some ideas for content, can you give me some examples of the worst possible things I could do? Or can you ask me how to come up with content in a surprising way? Reframe this question for me in a surprising way, in a delightful way, in a slightly concerning way. You just ask it to ask you a question back, and just insert adjective about how you would like it to reframe it, and see how it adapts to things. And
it's
it will just
fascinating.
Approach
I mean, for everyone who didn't see the post from today, I mean, let's just, again, for context purposes, like Dave said, he's an illustrator, a graphic designer, but some of the ideas on the picture of this post were absolutely epic. Change my name and logo every single day for a year. Perform an ex-employee seance. Turn my e-commerce site into a Where's Waldo. If you want to buy it, you got to find it first. I mean, like, this was epic level 50 terrible ideas.
Yeah.
Right? And antisocial, go online just to film silent videos and reply to everyone with blank voice notes. Like, these were the most epic, terrible ideas I had ever seen. And again, the idea there, and I think that's the genius of it, is that when you see something that sounds terrible, you think, oh, what's the opposite of that?
Yeah.
And it's easy to come out with negative. Negative is always an easy trait for human beings, right? It takes work for us to be grateful and to find not just that we're grateful about our family, but why are we grateful for whatever it is, right? Prove that you're actually grateful for it, right? Like, oh, I saw someone the other day who had lost, their spouse recently, so I'm really grateful for my spouse. That's the right way of being grateful, right? Me and Adam Thomas spoke about this recently on the podcast. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when you think of terrible ideas, right away, you can think of really good ideas that are the exact opposite of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you've been prompted, like you said. And the most interesting piece about this is that the best way to use AI is to get better at the prompts. So effectively, what we're learning is how to prompt ourselves through that process to learn how to help ourselves to creatively think better. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And you might get people who are actually who genuinely don't enjoy coming up with ideas and are woeful at it, and they will use AI to come up with ideas. And more power to them. They should, because they've either no interest in doing it for themselves, or they just know they'll be awful at it, or whatever it might be. But if you get genuine enjoyment from that part of the creative process, then the last thing on earth you should be doing is trying to make it more efficient and get some algorithm to think of ideas for you. For me, if I'm creating the visual identity for the company and we start with a blank piece of paper, quite often, even more so recently, actually, people are coming to me and they don't even have a name for a product that they're coming up with, for example. So we sit down and we start from there. Like, right, what are we going to call this? What's the story behind the name? What's the twist on it? How are we going to tackle the tone of voice? How are we then going to attack the visuals? All building all of that and then looking at this thing when it's finished is such a joy that if any part of that process, if I outsourced any part of that process to even another person, let alone a series of ones and zeros, I know that in a couple of years I would just hate doing this, because all of the reason that I got into it in the first place, all of those little bits of joy that get built to make this final project, I'd be slowly stripping them away until there was nothing left but this arbitrary process that just pays me at the end, which is fine, because I'm doing this for money at the end of the day, but I still want to enjoy it at the same time. So yeah,
and I think at the end of the day, like that's the part that people enjoy about being creative, is coming up with ideas. Like, I was speaking to a creative today and he said, for lack of a better word, like, it's a god complex to a certain degree. Like, I just like creating stuff and seeing how it turns out and that it works and that people enjoy it. I get that pat on the head that's like, oh, you did a good job. Like a little dog, like, just really excited about it, right? Like, he minimized it to a certain degree. And I was like, dude, like, just remember, like, it's not just about that. It's also the passion that you have when you do this. Like, you get into it and you love being involved in creating these worlds that essentially you're creating.
Yeah.
And I think that, like you said, the difference, I think, in the future isn't going to be with, AI taking everyone's jobs or, taking jobs from creatives. It's going to be the people who learn how to use AI effectively in their own way to stay ahead of the curve by asking it to prompt them with something delightful or different, or, helping them to come up with 50 terrible ideas, not the ideas themselves, but give me a bunch of random different things that I can string together. Okay, hyena, dog, monkey, cat, and, a bunch of fruit. Okay, apple, orange, milk. And then trying to take all those weird things and lump them together in some crazy way. That's going to be the people that are going to get ahead, right? And everyone else who doesn't learn how to use AI in an effective way to creatively think, or, get rid of the mundane things that, yes, people should get some of those things off their plate with AI. Those are going to be the people that I think are going to be left behind, not by AI itself.
Yeah, there'll be a. I mean, it's definitely going to take some creative jobs. It already has. Like, one of the first sort of casualties in visuals was concept artists. So if you think of the very early stages when someone is planning the production of a TV program, or they're planning the production of a video game, that's when you're concepting how everything's going to look, and that's when you would have traditionally employed an artist to build those worlds for you. You to build the very basic sort of character design and world building. So I want to know what the villain's lair looks like. I want to know what the hero's village looks like. I want to know what the general terrain and visual identity of the world we're building looks like. You would have employed an artist to come up with that stuff before. And a video games company or a film production company can now sit in an afternoon and with a series of sentences and create all of that work in next to no time. Whereas it would have taken weeks and weeks and weeks for a concept artist to come up with it. So they lost their jobs fairly rapidly And there will
Interesting.
definitely be others that lose them. So that's the crap part about this. Like, there are definitely going to be casualties, and it will be the same in every single industry. And so there will be certain people that will just have to pivot. That, overused word, but will have to change the way that they are working, and they will find another way to do it. And there will be people who, like I said earlier, who get massively fatigued with this whole thing and they just want to work with humans. And some people will always find more value in working with people than they will with machines. So those people will
Right.
always exist. So there will still be a world for, the actual, the physical creation made by the person. But sort of the mass market for that will start to sort of contract, as it already has. So that's another reason why I'm such a strong advocate of keeping your mind sharp, because I think as creatives, I think we're a little bit too hung up on our skills, because it's our
Right. And
skills
that's
that are going
a
to
big
become
piece.
less valuable, but our
Right.
ideas will maintain value, because you could be the best guitar player in the world. You could be technically the most proficient, string smith that has ever graced planet Earth. That doesn't necessarily mean you're the best songwriter on Earth. They're two completely
Right.
different things. Because the best songwriter is the person who comes up with the good idea that resonates with millions of people who then go and buy their song. The technical guy is the guy who can sit and play absolutely everything and immaculately, and stuff that would make your jaw hit on the floor, but it's not necessarily stuff you want to sit and listen to on a Saturday afternoon. And that's the difference. Like, you can be insanely skilled in an area, but if you don't have the good ideas to translate them in a meaningful way to people, then your skills are
Right.
pretty meaningless. They're only really useful to you. So I think that's the sort of the mistake that a lot of creatives are making right now, because they've all got themselves up in arms about about AI, because they see it coming for their skills, and that's where they see their value is. So they see their significance being stripped away by the sheer existence of
Interesting.
artificial intelligence, but they shouldn't be thinking of it that way. They should be thinking every 5 to 10 years another technological advancement comes that means that we have to change the way we do. I mean, 15 years ago, the setup that I have in front of me right now did not exist. It was unthinkable for me to work from this little room in my house with people from all over the planet, and I've got this monitor in front of me that I can take this stylus and draw stuff on it and then send it in 2 seconds to someone at the other side of the planet. They can come back to me 2 seconds later and tell me whether or not they like it. If they do like it, they can then wire me money, which I'll have in another 2 seconds. Like, it's incredible. So there's, the way we work has always got to change and adapt. And the skills, you always got to try and change your skills. I've been keeping up with, Adobe's updates for the last 15 to 20 years, and it's, they're getting, the changes are more and more sort of aggressive, I suppose. The learning curve is bigger and bigger each year with each update, and just trying to stay on top of it is an absolute nightmare. But there will be less value placed on the skills as the actual outcome of creative becomes democratized and becomes easier to produce. But the ideas themselves, that's where your value lies, which is why I sort of bang on about creative thinking as much as I do at the minute.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we've covered a lot. What are the benefits of using AI within the creative process? What steps can we take to prevent AI from, destroying our brains, I guess I can say?
I suppose the first step is to be aware that it can happen, and to make sure that whatever steps in the process of what you do, I suppose, like, break down what it is you do and what parts of it you enjoy. And I'm speaking as a creative person. It's a word that I'm starting to despise, because I say it like 400 times a day. But
Right.
yeah, so break down which parts of the process you actually enjoy doing, and make sure they're the parts that you preserve They're the parts that you make sure that you do not outsource them to a machine.
Right.
Because then you will just start hating what you do, and you'll start hating being creative and creating things. And for most people who do the kind of stuff that I do, creating something from scratch is like it's this magical feeling that you can't replicate in any other way. And if
Right.
I lost it for any sort of reason, I'd be devastated. And I know that if whether it's coming up with the idea or the sketching out stuff and working through all the crap like sketches and ideas until you get the good one. If you've ever sat for an entire afternoon and come up with nothing but trash, just absolute crap, every idea is awful, you're angry with yourself, you feel like you want to give up, you throw everything aside and you reach it, you hit it, decide to hit it again tomorrow, and then tomorrow this little acorn appears in the middle of all the crap that you came up with the day before, and this little bloom of this great little idea, like nothing can replicate that feeling. It's incredible.
Right.
It's awesome. And then when you show it to someone who you're working with and they get it too, and then the final outcome comes and everybody's pleased with it, like it's brilliant. It's that all those little pieces are absolutely awesome. So there's loads and loads of things in my day-to-day life that bore the absolute hell out of me, and they're the things that I'm giving to AI. Because if they were to become automated or made more efficient, I know that I would be happier for them. So I suppose it's really figured out that if I take this one process and I make it more efficient, will it actually benefit me in the long term? And you have to decide what benefit looks like. Does benefit look like making more money? Does it look like clearing more time in your diary? Does it look like, blah blah blah, insert advantage? If that is the benefit that will actually improve your life and make you happier, then go for it. And it might not be one that would make me happier, but kind of, I suppose, break it down. And if it is something that would work, because we're too concerned with making things efficient. I think we're too concerned with productivity and efficiency and shareholder pleasing and all that nonsense that sometimes we don't actually stop and take a step back and think, well, actually, should we be trying to make this more efficient? There are certain things in life we shouldn't be trying to speed up to make them more productive. Like I've never been out having a drink with some friends and like belly laughing and thought to myself, I wish there was a way we could make this more productive and just like, make this a much quicker evening.
Because you just don't want it to end.
This evening's great, but it's been going on for 5 hours. It would have been so much more efficient if I had got all the laughs out in like 20 minutes, and then I could have just gone back to bed. I don't think anyone really thinks that. Exactly what you said. You want those nights to go on forever. And so there's like, I suppose there's like there's a line of doing your accounts to laughing with a load of friends. And when you're doing your accounts, that's the thing that I've no desire to do, and I want that to happen as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible, and help me automate that. And to the laughing your ass off with a load of friends and everything in between that. And there's a point where, making things more productive and making things more efficient and automating things is a great idea. And there's a point along the line where making things more efficient and more productive is actually probably a stupid thing to do. But I think we're in danger of not seeing where that kind of line is and pushing it to, a point where we all don't want to leave our bedrooms and talk to women anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's a very good point that you're bringing out, in the sense that it's about being human. It's about the human experience. It's about the relationships, right? And ultimately, it's about the feelings that we get within the work that we do, right? That's where the passion and the love for what we do comes from. And the more that we're able to lean into that and away from automating those pieces of what we do, the better off we are, versus trying to automate the whole entire thing. Like you said, it would be so much more efficient if I got in 20 minutes all these laughs. But it's not about the laughs. It's about the memories. It's about the camaraderie. It's about spending the time with each other. It's about creating those memories and the good feelings and enjoying, the being in the moment and just enjoying that space, that time. That is the human experience to a very big degree. And it's about enhancing that, not getting rid of it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's to a big degree the whole point of this conversation, right? It's about staying human and figuring out, even within the AI race, within the creative space, and in general, how do we stick to that human piece? Um, and I think that's really a big part of what we're trying to do here. But in general, I think the direction that we need to go. Um, yeah. Uh, I
Oh,
think here's an
but
interesting.
sorry. Actually, the question that you asked me was, how do we avoid um, like AI, just killing our heads in terms of creativity? And I think the first thing I said was like, just be aware that it can be a problem, and sort of pick out the parts of the process that you want to keep, and then automate the rest. But the other
Mhm.
thing is like to practice things. There's a thing. I've got an email newsletter that I send out every couple of weeks, which is based around creative thinking and trying to help people think better. And and the reason I decided to start it was because of this. I've been speaking to more and more people about. Um, I know a lot of people in my industry at the minute that are really struggling with the work is just dried up. At the
Mhm.
minute, it does. You can feel a change happening with the way people are willing to spend their money. You can already feel how my skills are becoming very quickly devalued, um, and it's affecting quite a lot of people who do what I do now. I know quite a few people who have been working for themselves for a long time who are currently looking for jobs, which
Wow.
saddens me because they always wanted to do their own thing for themselves, but they're now looking for part-time work because work has dried up to that extent. I'm fortunate enough that I'm not seeing that, but I'm not taking that for granted. I'm very aware that there is a sort of a shift happening. Um, God, I forgot where I was going. Yes, so on the newsletter side. So the reason that I created the newsletter is I want people to understand that their value is not necessarily in the the software that they use. My entire income is based around the Adobe suite that I use, to the Photoshop and the Illustrator to create logos and all that kind of stuff. It's there, that skill is there. And at the minute, AI's ability to create logos is kind of laughable, but I'm very, very aware that in a couple of years' time, it won't be. It'll be very, very good at it. So I have to see my value less in the things I create and the value in the ideas to create them in the first place, because
Right.
anybody can be sat in front of a prompt bar and have to type something in. Um, if you don't have the idea as to what to type into that, then you can have the most capable AI in the world. It's still going to produce crap for you. You don't know what you're saying to it. So, one of the very, very first emails that I put out, and they're all kind of archived on Substack, is an exercise that I encourage pretty much everybody to do. And it's to think of 10 ideas a day. And you can do it for a month, do it for 2 months, do it for 6 months, as long as you can. But the more and more you do it, and you kind of, depending on which way you're wired, putting a time constraint on it can be beneficial. For some people, it can put a bit too much stress on them, so it's probably not the way to go. But the way I
Right.
used to do it was just put a 10-minute timer on it. So I just force myself to write 10 ideas out. And for me, it was ideas based around content that I was going to create. But it could be around anything, really. Um, and you just force yourself to write 10 ideas out every day, and you don't put no one has to see them ever. They don't ever
Right.
have to come to anything. They can be awful, but it's forcing you to get ideas out of your head. And the more you do it, the better you become. And when you're put into scenarios when you do need to think on the fly, and you need to connect seemingly unconnectable things in sort of strange and wonderful ways, you get better at it because you're just training that muscle every single day. So that's one thing that I encourage people to do if they start feeling that the old grey matter is starting to fail on them, like mine just
Right.
did, as I couldn't finish that sentence. Um, then doing little exercises like that is really, really helpful.
Yeah, and I think that accomplishes two things. I mean, one, it's an action that people can take that'll keep those creative juices flowing.
Mm.
And the more you do it, the more consistent you'll be able to come up with ideas.
Correct. I noticed that I'm not as consistent with it now. I do it every so often if I start to feel that I'm getting a bit crap. But there was a point I was doing it religiously in. Did I start it in lockdown? Maybe it was the year after. It was either 21 or 22.
It was in 20. Yeah, it was around that time.
Yeah, 21 maybe. I did it religiously for about 6 months. I did it pretty much every single day, and blah, blah, blah. And I just noticed like an insane improvement in just how sort of fast I could come up with stuff. So yeah, it's very worthwhile. Definitely worthwhile.
Yeah. Here's an interesting one, and then from here, I think we'll open the floor to Q&A. Where should people start? Right. So there's a lot that we've spoken about in terms of how to keep our brains moving, why that's even a thing, how AI can help us. Where's the first place that people should just begin this process?
Start using AI, you mean, or start thinking more creatively?
Thinking creatively using AI, keeping their, gray matter between their ears, moving and, creative. Where's a place that they should just start to keep this, idea of just being able to come up with ideas on a consistent basis, any of that?
I think the first thing is most certainly to go to doodlejuice.substack.com to subscribe to my newsletter, because I have all sorts of little creative exercises on there that are all kind of archived and sitting. And I've got a ton more lined up to share with everybody. And I think what I wanted to do with that is to literally have an archive of that's the reason I liked Substack, is rather than just sending out an email newsletter that you've then got to dig through your inbox to find other ones. It's all kind of there in one place. So if you're ever thinking, I just want, if I could think of some exercise to just help me think of ideas better, you can go there, click on a random email, and you'll excuse me, something will pop up that you can try. But there's loads of little exercises, and I think you should get used to how to reframe things. I'm putting out a video tomorrow with a really, really useful exercise that I want loads of people to know. And this is, you've probably done this yourself. When you see a really good idea, whether it's you're flicking on your phone or you're watching the TV or you're driving around, you see a really, really interesting idea and you think to yourself, why didn't I think of that? And you have that idea, and you think the reason that pops into your head is because you're more than capable of thinking of that idea. Say you see like a really clever billboard ad or something, you're like, that's good. Why didn't I think of that? Because you could have, you just weren't placed in the scenario to get that idea out of your head.
Right.
And a good little exercise to do to become the person who thinks of the ideas more, and so you become less of the person who goes, why didn't I think of that? Is every time you see an idea that prompts you to come up with that question, write down what it was you saw, whether it was a joke on TV or something, whatever that really interesting thing was, write down what it was, what you liked about it, and then write down what question you would have needed to have been asked in order for you to have thought of it.
Interesting.
So, yeah, because I'm all about thinking of better questions. Like, creativity is all about the questions that you ask yourself and reframing different ways, rather than just asking yourself a very dull, straightforward, how can I think of an idea for this? You need to get better at thinking of, how can I come up with the worst possible thing I could do? Just reframing really daft and sort of exaggerated questions are the way to get really interesting ideas out of your head. So every time you see something really, really cool and you're like, oh my God, that's fantastic, write down what it is, but also follow it up with, if I was to think of that, what question would I needed to have been asked to get that idea out of my head? And the more and more of those questions that you have written down in a little list tucked away somewhere, every time you sit down for a little creative session, you want to think of some things, go into that list and read out those questions and ask yourself those questions about the project that you're now working on and see how that changes your thinking on it. That's a cool little exercise.
Interesting. I actually like that a lot. And we'll open the floor to Q&A while we're continuing down that road. But I mean, like, again, the whole idea there is, I mean, it's reverse engineering in a big way, and trying to think like, what would the question I had needed to be asked? That's reverse engineering from point B to get back to point A.
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's trying to understand the reasoning behind something, which requires a lot of thinking. And then once you come up with the answer, you can then move forward from there to come up with a completely different idea along those same lines of thought.
Correct.
And within that process, you're coming up with multiple different aspects of the creative way of thinking within those moments. And I think that's really powerful. One of the things that I think, that I think, anybody would ask, is when it comes to, this whole idea with, creative ideas and, going through this process, is to not be efficient with it to a certain degree, right? Because the enemy of creative thinking to a certain degree is going to be that efficiency, right? And trying to make it as perfect as possible, and trying to do it, in a, yes, you want to do it within a certain time frame sometimes, and that to a certain degree is efficient, but you want it to be sloppy, right? To a big degree, I think that creative thinking is just letting things be. And as human beings, we have struggled with that sometimes because we want to be in control. We want to be on top of things, and we want to make sure that we're, on just everything's in order, everything's organized. And in reality, when it comes to creative thinking, when it comes to being human in that way, we don't want a string of ones and zeros. We want it to be all over the place. We want it to be sloppy. We want it to that's the whole idea of doodling, right? Doodle juice. It's the whole point. It's just letting it flow, letting it happen on its own without you trying to force it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big piece that people need to remember within that process.
Yeah. It's a messy little process, which is why it's beautiful. And it's kind of, no one really understands how sort of creative thinking actually works. And that's part of its beauty as well. Because if it became this sort of formulaic, rigid process, then where's the joy in that? If there was this perfect equation or this perfect thing you could do that would, this is it, figured out, lads, we've got it. Then again, there's no value in it. If everybody was able to come up with an amazing invention and an amazing song and an amazing story idea for a movie, because all you had to do was this, and this, and you would come up with that amazing idea, then we wouldn't appreciate any of those things. So I like that there's a bit of mysticism around it, and the only thing an idiot like me can do is figure out little techniques that can help you sort of prize better ideas out. I'll never be able to tell you a surefire way of getting great ideas out, and I wouldn't want to be able to either, because that sounds depressing. But just finding other interesting ways of reframing things, like that one that I just shared with you about, finding something that makes you think, why didn't I think of that, and then writing down the question. I have no idea if anyone has ever thought of that one before. I'm sure they have, but I genuinely came up with it organically about 2 weeks ago, and I thought, oh, that actually works. And so I've started creating a little list like that myself and asking questions, and I find that it has been working for me. So, which is why I'm now starting to talk about it. But I'm now trying to think of creative ways to think creatively,
Right.
So I can help more people think creatively. Because I just think it's where our value is now. Because our skills are about to be taken over by the robots, so we need to be able to think better.
Yeah, and I think that it's, I mean, to a certain degree, I mean, the fact that you're so excited about this is you're being that lamplighter for creatives, in the sense of, like, there is a light here. and there's something that we can do, that we can control. This is something that every single person can do as long as they're willing to put in the time and the effort. And ultimately, that's where proper goals are. It's about understanding what are the things that you can control and acting on that.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's just a lot of fluff and depression where nothing's in my hands and I can't do anything. And, I'm just going to wait for a client to come to me. And that's not the way to do it. I mean, even when you're waiting, you want to be productive. Right? And there are things that you should be doing when you're waiting. And, a big part of this podcast is all around that idea, sales, entrepreneurship, and business, and keeping yourself moving forward.
Yeah.
And creative thinking, I think, is a big process of that. This has been awesome. For everyone who's here, I mean, I like to say this at the end of every single podcast. This is a page of notes. Please don't try to implement everything at once that we've spoken about today. There's a lot of really amazing ideas, nuggets of you. And if you try to implement every single little thing you have on your notes, you'll fall, break your nose, and come away bloody and crying. It's really a much better idea to go slow. Take one thing that you took away from today that you want to implement, whether it's what are the 50 worst, ideas you can come up with, whether it's, trying to stick to 10 ideas a day, whatever it is, stick to that idea, do it for some time before trying to add anything else in. Dave, we were talking right before we started. You wanted to make an offer to everyone who is sitting here today. You mentioned a little bit about it earlier, a couple of minutes ago. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, I do creative consultancy sessions with people where we sit down for 60 minutes and we go through whatever they want. Sometimes people have some designs they just want some critique on, and we can literally go through them on the call. Sometimes people want to talk through ideas on content they can create. Sometimes it's just generally getting them out of some sort of creative rut to think of just some ideas. It could be all manner of sort of things related to creative thinking or design in general. And it's just however you would best like to utilize me for 60 minutes, you can do. With get your mind out of the gutter, Yaacov. I saw that. However you would like to utilize me in 60 minutes in a consensual way, and over Zooms generally. That's something I offer. So what I would like, if anybody is interested, I would like to give away one of those. And the way to win said 60 minutes is to write in. I'm assuming you have some sort of commenty part here.
Yeah, I mean, they could do it here. They could just send you a LinkedIn message, and they'll just give one out over the course of the next few weeks, whatever it is.
Yes, write to me or in here or wherever about why you would be the best person to receive one of these 60-minute sessions, and whichever message amuses me the most or makes me cry or depresses me, whichever one
elicits enough emotion,
the strongest emotion out of me, will win it.
That's fantastic. So I've put Dave's contact information through his LinkedIn, as well as the access to his Substack, which he mentioned earlier, for anybody who wants to check that out. For myself, I like to offer a free 30 minutes to anybody who's here, anybody who's listening. For those of you who are here, my contact information has been put into the chat. For those of you that are listening, it'll be in the description, as well as Dave, his LinkedIn, as well as his Substack will be in the description on the on Spotify or wherever you might be listening in after this goes live there. And yeah, I mean, for myself, it's if you want to take your sales game to the next level, there's a lot of strategy involved. Feel free, schedule a time. They get booked out pretty quickly, so don't sit on that too long. And yeah, I mean, this has been absolutely fantastic. Dave, you have been so much fun to talk to over the last about hour already. Time flies when you're having fun. So thank you so much for your valuable time and helping us to stay human. And everyone who's here, thanks so much for being here. And until next week, have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you, man. Cheers. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody.